So I'll kick off the panel by just quickly throwing out a question to everyone. So for the first time in about 20 years, the industry actually has experienced growth. I think the latest figures, it was up by 7 or 8%. So given that we've come out of a long period of darkness, I'm wondering, are you optimistic in terms of the future of the industry? And maybe I'll kick it off with Steve and take it down the line.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Well, I've always been optimistic about the industry. And although in the past few decades, it's looked as though it's shrunk, on one level, yeah, because the economy of the music business went through an incredible transformation, as you know, and is still going through it. But in reality, the music business was growing tremendously. When digital came along, the growth was exponential, although economically it didn't reflect that just because of the nature of the technology. But there's always an adjustment period. And with the advent of digital downloading and all this and free streaming or streaming, music is a lot more accessible. And there has been more and more people having the opportunity to reach diverse music. I mean, when I was a kid, there was no way I could go and listen to Stravinsky, Led Zeppelin, Charlie Parker, West Side Story, you know what I mean? You had to figure all that out, but now the whole catalog of music is available. So it's always been growing. And what I'm very optimistic in is that there will be an adjustment that keeps the people who are making music, the protection of their intellectual property is just in transition. Because with companies like ASCAP, collection, royalty publishing, collection agencies, with the advent of the internet and the digital downloading, there was just a glitch. You know, there needs to be a catch-up, and it is happening. It is happening. So I don't think there was ever not growth, but now the economics is catching up a little bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, the industry took a lot of flack, but it seems like it's one of the first industries to actually manage this transition. In some ways, it's a pretty resilient industry, given that it's over 100 years old and it's gone through so many different formats. Yeah. But it's still pretty vibrant.
And it'll continue to go through different formats. Whenever we think we're there, you know, surprise.
Bryan, Brendon?
Wait, there was growth in the industry? How come no one told me about it? Where? Who got money? Did you get any? Was it you? Steve? Bryan?
We got some.
You think I got some? You guys
I got money.
Some. Got some, yeah.
You got some? You didn't call me? You got a call.
I took you out to dinner, remember?
You took, that was it? My half of the dinner was
he owed it to me.
I think it's funny because music is such an interesting place. I've decided to kind of go into business for myself over the last few years, and I kind of was doing this anyway, but I just keep doing it more and more often. And I've talked to different bands, like bunch of modern metal guys, like even the Periphery guys and stuff, where they have some interesting wisdom to depart, where they think that like music is the loss leader. And they're in the T-shirt company, which is an interesting way to look at it too, because that is part of it as well. But I mean, honestly, all we're trying to do is make something worth listening to and get it out there, and hopefully be able to keep the lights on at the same time. But I'm interested to know, like specifically, where did the growth happen? Because
it's all driven by streaming.
It's all streaming. So how many people here buy records in the room? I'd be interested in seeing. So that's maybe.
Go tell your friends.
Yeah, that's maybe half. I buy records. That's what I do. Do you buy?
So I want to clarify: are you guys buying actual CDs when you say you buy records?
Yeah. And is it the physical? It's physical, okay. Right?
Go tell your friends.
Yeah. Okay, back there. Yeah, he does too. Okay, and how many people are streaming just like on Spotify pretty much all the time? All right. Okay. Cool. I'm just interested to know what the difference is in the room. I buy everything just because I want it where I want it. If I want to take a plane ride, and I want to make sure my music's with me, you know.
So you actually buy physical stuff?
I buy. Oh no, I'll actually. I won't stream it. I'm an iTunes guy, so I'll buy stuff
the
on
download,
iTunes
yeah.
all the time, and I don't even do the iTunes like Apple Music. I'll just if I like it, I'm gonna buy the whole record. It's $9. I can find that money. I can find a way to make that money. I can raise that money.
Kickstarter campaign to buy Brendon's music.
I can find a way to raise $9.99 and listen to an old Jethro Tull record that I forgot that I really liked a lot. But no, I'm just interested in all that stuff, and I'm trying to find out all this stuff myself too, because I own the master of 3 records, just because I decided I'm not going to wait for anyone to tell me what to do, and that's part of just getting started. I'm going to do it myself, and hopefully I'll just make this money back, and it'll just be a fun thing, and I'll get better as a musician and learn to write songs. So I don't know, I'm like all over this whole thing.
Well,
Yeah.
so curious about Bryan and Jackie. I mean, have you guys noticed like a noticeable uptick over the last couple of years versus where we were a few years ago? I mean, is it evident, or is it just a bunch of Wall Street Journal people publishing numbers?
I have numbers. So
I saw that, and you filled me
don't
out
say
before
it
we
like
got on
that.
stage.
I have numbers.
Don't say it like
There,
that.
I have numbers.
No, I mean just.
I took you out to dinner.
I know, but don't get smug about it.
No, but the thing here's I wanted to just do a quick introduction. I manage this band called the Aristocrats, and we are not, I would say, traditionally hard rock heavy metal. We're kind of on the fringe of it as an instrumental outfit, but heavy metal and hard rock people touch our world because I played with Steve and Brendon, and I played with Brendon in Death Clock, and Steve in his band, and in Joe Satriani's band, and our drummer Marco Miniman played with Necrophagist and Creator. So there's some definite metal lineage going on there. So we touch this world in a way. So I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there before I said anything about where I'm coming from. The Aristocrats is a completely independent, self-generated band. We couldn't possibly be any more DIY. There's 3 people in it. There's 1 person who manages our label, and I'm the manager of the band, and that's it. That's our organization. And so we've watched since 2011 when we put out our first record, and then the second record was 2013, and then the third record was 2015. And I don't know if this is a function of our quirk and our business model or not, but the weird thing that we've seen is that the percentage of our business, regardless of we've experienced growth with each record, but the percentage of the business that has been hard copy CDs since the beginning is exactly the same. In 2011, it was 65% of our business. And in 2016, it was 65% of our business. But the percentage of digital downloads versus streaming changed dramatically. And even though they were a smaller percentage of the overall business model, they went in different directions. The digital downloads, like iTunes, I'm an iTunes guy too. I can't really buy a bunch of CDs and carry them all over the world if I'm on tour or traveling, or we travel a lot, right? So I'm an iTunes guy. iTunes has gone down 7% for us in the last 5 years.
Downloads.
Yes, that's percentage. Streaming has gone up 600%. Now, of course, that doesn't add up to all that many dollars, as we can just ask Katy Perry or Lady Gaga or anything like that. But there's a thing out there that Steve was referencing, which is that there's all these people that we would not normally have a way to get music to, or maybe they're not going to make the purchase right away, but they'll stream it. And then maybe they'll come to a show. I mean, in the end of the day, I think we're kind of all in the live music business. That's really where this is all going. It's the one thing that you can't replace is you go out and play live. And if you go out and play live, then you can sell CDs and sign them. And that's if you own the label, then you can make a big net there. So
Jackie, with the bands you work with, actually, it's interesting for me to see how many of the audience are still buying CDs, given that most people actually look under a certain age. But I'm curious, how much of the business that you're involved in is still driven by sale of physical product, and how has that transition to streaming affected you?
Well, I think that for the first, if it hasn't already, streaming income's actually going to be close to over half of our label's revenue that I work for. I happen to work with a ton of rock bands, and that have a lot, huge catalogs, and so while it's mildly scary, and I'm like sort of old school like you guys, where it's like, no, I buy this, and it's considered old school now to buy the CD, right? Because you don't have to, but I'm glad that people still do. I think there's still something exciting about going to the record store and buying CD and the day that it comes out, but now we just post on Instagram that we did it, but it's still, and I'm so glad to see that there's so many of you guys that do, but I just think it's an exciting time for music fans and even to be on the business side, if you embrace the technologies, but we're, in terms of what I do and working for a record label, we've embraced it, and the streaming platforms and working with them and figuring out how to maximize, what we can do with our artists.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jackie, half the gross revenue is streaming? Is that for the whole label or specific bands?
The whole label. We have a large catalog. I mean, I'm working with bands like Motley Crue and Blondie and Papa Roach and Nikki Sixx's side projects and Five Finger Death Punch and all of these.
So some of that stuff is legacy, but some of that stuff is current releases.
Correct.
But all under hard rock and roll, heavy metal kind of thing,
Mostly,
right?
Mostly. Yeah.
I've seen that too. That I've seen through Death Clock and through Metalocalypse and all that stuff. That there's a hunger for that audience to really own it, to really support it in a way that a lot of other genres, I haven't seen that same thing.
Yeah, but in terms of streaming being half the
Right.
dollars, right?
Right.
Just imagine how many streams that is versus the amount of hard product that was purchased.
Well,
I find
the
that's
way I
pretty
look
fascinating.
at it, I get every 200 billion streams, I get about 45 cents. So I mean, that's a lot of streams.
That's
and when
awesome.
you think about it, it's a lot
Awesome.
of streams. Yeah.
But traditionally, heavy metal listeners buy CDs.
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to pop.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. Steve, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think one interesting trend right now that's worth touching on is the amount of listenership and how that's going up, right? So I think the sales have changed. Like, there's a big evolution in that and where the money is going. But then to your point, Steve, the diversity of listenership in terms of what people have access to is totally different. It's a lot more democratized. And I think what that drives, which is super interesting, and the numbers show it, is people listening to more and more and more and more music that they wouldn't have listened to otherwise. And really, like, sort of falling down that rabbit hole of, I'm listening to this, so now I'm going to go listen to this, and I wonder what the influence was to that, until you're 25 steps away from where you started, which is an interesting thing. I think the fascinating thing to see from here is how that'll actually catch up, in terms of revenues and what that'll mean in the future.
Well, it's not as event driven, right? The whole thing of like sitting down and listening to a record used to be kind of an event, especially when you had to put vinyl on. Or put a cassette in the cassette deck. That would be a thing. It's like, wow, you could put the cassette in the car. But now everything is kind of, I think there's probably more incidental listening.
Yeah,
so
so
along with the wider listenership, there's also this kind of different way.
I was
going
going
to
ask about that. Have you guys, as on the creative side, has it changed at all the way that you're approaching music making, or the way that you're thinking of the way that you push out your art? The fact that more and more people are not consuming things in their totality, right? So, Steve, when I was a kid, I couldn't wait for your Passion and Warfare album to come out, right? And I remember just listening to it, front to back over and over and over again. Or when Joe Satriani put out Surfing with the Alien, right? I mean, but today we tend to listen to things in bits and pieces. So from a creative standpoint, is that influencing you guys at all? Or are you still thinking, within the construct of an album? And, I think it's worth noting that technology always drove the way that art is created, right? So, pre the ability to store as much information on a full LP, people put out singles. The construct of an album didn't come out until, I want to say, the 40s, really.
Well, I always have a tendency to do much more than I should. So when CDs came out, I just started packing them with 73 minutes because that's as much as they can hold. And then when new CDs came out, I was packing them with more. So when digital came out, I would make records that were long, But the technology and the way it's changed and the way it's affected what I do in the making of music has been fantastic. Of course, there's a romance in the sound of analog that I like, but working in the digital domain opens up an incredible. It's unquantifiable, the things that you can do now with digital tools. You know, so it absolutely has an effect on the creative visualization. But at the end of the day, it's the way the music feels to you as the writer of it and the creator of it that's of optimum importance. You know, I always say that's the priority. It's not how you're going to make it. It's not who's going to buy it. It's not how you're going to sell it. It's not any of those things, because those things slow you down. The first thing you need is to feel as though what you're creating is your absolute unique, extreme potential as a creative person, because then you're satisfying yourself. And that's the most important thing, because people think, I need to create something so that I can be successful in the world. And it's not, you know, when I'm known, when everybody knows how great I am, when I've sold millions of records, when I'm wealthy, when I have Grammys, when I'm on the cover of every magazine, and when all of these things happen, then I can be happy. That's an illusion. Because
What?
I have all those things in a sense, you know, and they're nice, but really the real fulfilling thing is the manifestation of your creative vision. That's number one, really. And then how you get it into the world, that's continuing to change, and it's easier and easier and easier every year. Now is the greatest time, as far as my perspective, to be in the music business as an independent, because the tools that are at your disposal are extraordinary. You have to have the goods, you know, but now you don't have to rely on a record company to get it out there. In 10 minutes, you can have your record in every single digital store around the world. And you have to market. There's all the accoutrements of releasing music, but the technology makes it so much easier today. And am I going on too long here? You know, there's three different, your experience in the business is going to be based on your attitude about it, you know? And when you look at digital, there's usually three different attitudes that I see from musicians. One is the doom and gloom. Everything sucks. Everything, the fucking music industry sucks. I'm dead, I can't sell records anymore. I'm going to hell in a handbag, the whole music industry, because digital ruined my life, you know, streaming and all these things. And that's a perspective that many people have. And if that's your perspective, it'll be your reality, and you're living in hell, right? Because it's here. Another perspective that's of a higher quality is when you look at all the digital or any of the technology that's available to you, and the attitude is, how can this serve me? Because it can. It's there for you. It's there to serve you. And as far as my career, when digital came along, it was a boon. I mean, I started really doing well. I had a label. I was one of the first labels to have an account at iTunes. I started, instead of getting 6 cents, which is a good deal, from a download from Sony, I get 72 because I uploaded it myself. So I don't need to sell as much, and it's so much easier to market it. So the technology has, but I was looking for the things that can serve me, and I found them. The third perspective, which is probably just for few people to breathe this air, they look into the technology and they think, okay, what is it missing? What doesn't it have that I want? And these are the innovators. So really, you need to just decide what your perspective is, and that will be your reality.
I'm curious from the rest of the panel, how active are you in the more, you know, business-oriented facets of your creative career? And to Steve's point, do you see the ability to reach an audience directly, right? And you no longer have to go through the traditional or former formerly traditional channels of a label. Is that an asset, and also does it give you sort of a lot more control, given that you actually know who these people are, and therefore you can have a deeper and more meaningful connection with them, and then do a whole lot of other things in terms of the experiences that you create for the fans?
I think, well, it's interesting. Depending on how deep and closely you are connected, if you're independent, you can actually see who, your biggest fans are. If you're looking directly at social media every once in a while, if you know who the people are who buy VIP packages, you know that there's this hardcore group of people who are going to kind of participate in anything that you do. And digitally, you can reach them however you want, just like Steve said. But beyond that, I don't, and this is coming from me, I'm a super spreadsheet nerd.
I can tell. Man.
Yeah, I worked in a corporate office for 6 years, and so, but I don't, even though I know that moment is coming, I think you guys can both speak to this. You know that when you're in the creative mode, you know the moment will come when the record is close to done, when you got to start pivoting and thinking about when the release date is, what the marketing campaign is going to be, how much money you're going to spend on this, who's going to do this for you, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's really important that before then, that you sequester yourself and not give it too much consideration. Because even if you had a perfect plan for the minute that you first conceived of your album, I'm working on a double album right now, a solo album. It's going to take a year to write and another year to record. The whole industry can change from the second that you first thought of it to the second that you're actually going to put it out. So I think this goes back to your point, is you just kind of have to make the thing that speaks to you and be true to your own artistry. Even if the market isn't looking for it right that second. If you feel like you have something that you can serve to your audience that they'll really like and that fulfills you as an artist, do that. And then, when you're done with the creative phase, then peek your head up and be like, okay, now what's the best way to get this to people right now? Because right now is all there is. It's not the same as it was 2 years ago, and it's not the same as it's going to be in 2 years. So be creative first and protect that space.
And that's one of the things that's constant, is your creativity.
Yeah, I mean, streaming could be something else in 5 years. We could be talking about how
it's-
streaming were downloads.
Yeah, it's just a means of reaching an audience. That's all it is. I mean, it was downloads. Now it's streaming. Maybe it's virtual reality next.
It's your
Who knows?
tools.
It's their tools.
But it's not the goods.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and I think increasingly more too, once you leave the process of actually making the music, you can get very creative with the distribution. I think that's something that's really, really different now, as we've basically moved from what we're talking about here is openness versus sort of closed distribution. And I think what that means is that there's new ways to get music out that are completely non-traditional that people are taking advantage of, that sometimes work and sometimes completely don't. I think one example from a totally different genre, but an artist that hit #1 on the charts 2 straight weeks, which was Future, released back-to-back albums with 18 songs on them that were designed to be created into playlists. So it was designed so that you, as the fan, could say, this is the album I want to make from this artist, which is basically using the digital distribution platform as an instrument to help with that mixing process, with that mastering process, to figure out what the end product looks like.
Well, or look at what Netflix is doing for television series, right? It's totally changing the model and saying, you know what, you don't have to wait for a full season to be rolling out once a week. You can just binge all you want. Here's all 15 episodes of this series, and I'm wondering what that translation would be into the music side of things. Brendon,
I don't know. I mean, some of that stuff really works, and some of it really, really doesn't work. I mean, there are different. I've got different shows that I'm producing at different streaming places. So, I have one, and some of them. Some networks will make a pilot of a TV show and put it up in the nether sphere of nothingness and go, hey, no one watched your show. And you go, well, yeah, of course, because you hid it. You hid it inside of Amazon. So in a labyrinth of shows that I don't know what they are. How am I supposed to, you're going to leave a bread trail crumb of something? How am I supposed to find this stuff? And there are shows like that everywhere that don't get any ratings, and because this goes back to what I was thinking, just how does a musician, how does a creative person work with the business side? And I know where my strengths are. I know that I really like serving something up in a particular way. So even with Metalocalypse, I knew that if we did this right, if we were authentic with what we were doing, we would probably hit an audience that hasn't been spoken to before. There has not been a heavy metal animated show before. I mean, the closest thing is what? Gem and the Holograms? Not heavy metal. What? Josie and the Pussycats? Not really playing their guitars. Partridge Family. I have some investigators out on it. I'm finding out if they had calluses on their fingers. But I think like guys like us, I think it's if we can make the record that we wish to make from the beginning, which we can do that now. If we can do that, and then also find a way, an ideal way to show people the coolest way to kind of just experience this project. That's where I come in. That's where I think that's where my strength is, with marketing, with trying to tease people, with trying to show them just a touch of something, a tease of something that they may already like. And then trying to basically get that whole audience to just know. I mean, you've got an audience that's been around since the Zappa days, who want to see what you're doing constantly.
A few.
Yeah, but all you need to do is kind of like turn on the light and go, hey, new record coming up, and you have to find those same people. So that's part of what you're doing from record to record, right? You're building an audience with Aristocrats and the Satriani Envy and.
It's
Death
so
Clock and all
interesting.
that
There's
stuff.
3 completely different models here. You've got, the traditional model that has evolved over a long period of time. You have a totally unique model that started with a television show.
Yeah.
And we have like this brand new kind of totally digital DIY thing.
Yeah,
It's
but it all started
us.
from a van touring
Yeah.
everywhere and getting people excited about that stuff. So I'm now thinking, what can I do? Well, I'm in the middle of I'm using all this stuff as an excuse to do stuff I want to do anyway. So I put out a comic book with Galacticon to tell this absurd intergalactic divorce redemption story that I think is funny and absurd and somewhere between Wild Strawberries and Bergman and some kind of strange space lawyer creditors trying to chase down a hero and stuff like that. To me, that's interesting. So I said, screw it. I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to wait for anybody to tell me to do it. I'm just going to go do that. And then I'm in the middle of making a video right now where I'm using all practical effects from like 1978 just to make something that's cool and splashy, and people that may want to hear something that looks like something, and try to put it all into one visual bucket and make it make sense, and then also make it worth looking at, make it worth getting through the timeline without checking it, make it be intriguing enough to hopefully to ignite your brain in some way, to open your subconscious and to have music affect you in the way that I really think it should, which is as some kind of cool emotional umbilical cord between the song and the person's brain,
Well, and for me, just hearing you guys talk on this panel, I mean, that's what's cool about today, that there's these options, right? I mean, 30, 40 years ago, there wouldn't be as many options in terms of interacting with an audience and connecting with an audience. But the fact that you're talking about multiple different models, or business models, right, that you guys are pursuing, to me, that's the coolness about being in this juncture of the industry. Jackie, when we were talking on the phone, you talked a lot about how you use social media as a great sort of metric tool for the bands that you work with. Can you elaborate more on that in terms of your involvement and how you're probably using this data to approach further development of these careers?
Sure. I mean, besides social media, I mean, we're talking about these streaming platforms. We have access to an insane amount of data now, and we use that. I mean, in addition to being a manager, I do radio promotions, which means I call radio stations and I speak to the people who make the decisions to what goes on the air, and I tell them why they should be playing the band's songs that I'm working with. And aside from my charming personality, I have to actually use data and convince them this is why you should be playing these artists. And these streaming platforms have, I mean, besides just the streams alone, you just have access to so much information, and that's what people are, that's what radio programmers are using to make their decisions.
Do they give you this information? I mean, how much access do you have, let's say, to your Spotify data
Well,
or
on
to
the
your
labels
Pandora data?
side, we do have access to back-end data, when you have a label type account and you have access to where the streams are coming from, the age that people are, and
So in a funny way, if you're an independent artist, you probably have an advantage over an artist with a major record label, because you have access to data that most artists on a major label actually can't even get because their label has it, but they don't always see it.
But artists have, even if you're not on a label, artists can have, these accounts on these streaming platforms as well, and get to the back end and find out exactly who. I mean, imagine you can find out who's listening to your songs, which songs are the ones that are getting listened to the most, how old people are, or where they even discovered them, which is a whole different thing, like about why it's so great, because there's these playlists offer artists that have no place to live as it relates to like terrestrial radio. You know, terrestrial radio has, in terms of new artists, they'll play like 14 songs, right? In any given time, as opposed to all the other old stuff that you already know. Well, these playlists, you know, they've got like 50, 60 songs, and they're playing not just, okay, this is rock and this is all that lives under the rock umbrella, or alternative, where you know, in terrestrial radio, you can't even find guitars anymore. But on alternative playlists, you know, it's a lot more broad. The lines are blurred, and I like that. I think it gives a lot more opportunity, and especially for artists that might not have gotten heard otherwise, because they're not getting played on the radio. But I just think it gives another tool for artists to be heard and discovered.
Steve, both with WeTransfer and before that, you were at Red Bull and you developed Sound Select. How important was it for you to monitor all this data to make decisions about artist promotion, artist discovery, and are we expecting every musician today to be a data scientist?
Absolutely not. I think, you know, the data thing is really interesting because it's I think you nailed it, right? It's something that, as and when the creative is out there, you can use to figure out where it should go. You can use to figure out an audience to match it with that's going to be into it and follow that as far as you can take it, right? I think in terms of choosing which artists to work with and things like that, I mean, there's a level of, do they have an audience that's developed? Are they doing something new? But I mean, the creative is everything. You know, if that's not there, even if the numbers are there, it turns out pretty hollow and it ends pretty quickly. That's not always true, but I think that's at least what I found. You know, I think it's a matter of, again, I think getting creative with how you get stuff into the world. And if you can figure out how to leverage some of this information that you have that you didn't have previously, it opens up a lot of different opportunities that you can get into. I don't think that necessarily means that data should always define what you make next. I think that probably comes from here, and I think that's more about why people get into music to begin with, which I don't think is to read spreadsheets. You know, but I
Sorry,
think,
Brian.
I'm
we
so
know you got
sad.
we know you got into music for the spreadsheets, man.
Sometimes it feels like that.
But I think it's about using that as a basis and as a tool, right? It's about
Well, they're all tools. You know, this is a funny thing. I remember, we haven't talked about this in a long time, but this, I think it was 1997 or 98. Yeah. And I was tracking Fever Dream for you, right? And so, no, it was Lucky Charms. That was first. And so we're in the studio, in his studio at the Hollywood House. And it was super, super early version of Pro Tools. It was like we just barely had it installed, and you had somebody kind of running around, and you were like, how does this work? How does this work? And so I played something, and you were like, oh, can you just like, I like that bit and I like that bit, but can you just like put them together? And the guy like did an edit live in front of Steve, and Steve was like, oh my God, this changes everything.
Well, yeah, and the similar thing happened when I was with Frank, because when I was 20 and I got into the studio, I didn't know what overdubbing was. I didn't know you could punch.
Yeah.
You know, I knew you could overdub, but I didn't know you could punch. And I didn't know what editing was.
Right.
And I saw him like cutting some tape together, and I'm like, what is he doing? And then he put it together and he played it, and the moment I saw it go over the head, it was like an epiphany. And I went, oh. And Frank, of course, it turns to me and goes, yep, makes every day like Christmas.
It really does.
Yeah, but that's so archaic compared to
Oh my God, you know.
digital editing.
And I think it really changes the creative process, just that tool alone. You know, it's like there would be if you were trying to get this one really tricky thing and you knew you were overdubbing on analog tape and the punch had to be just right. I mean, you could just get so caught up and tired and you get a headache from working on it too long, as opposed to just trying it 5 times, getting the really good one, and then just putting it in there and just moving on. And now you're creating. You're not thinking about the tool anymore, even though the tool is what made that creative process flow so quickly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, at its best, technology makes complexity simple, right?
Boy, you should put that on a billboard
Print
somewhere.
You know, it's interesting. As humans, we're always striving for 2 things in technology: convenience, more and more convenience, and quality, higher and higher quality, and there's always kind of a bump. So I mean, when you see the development, the evolution of the way we make music, the way we listen to it, the way we sell it, it's constantly moving more towards immediacy, because we want everything. We want it now, and it needs to be great. And why not? What do we, you should have it now, and it should be great, right? And this is what we're striving for, and it's not going to stop, So what you were just saying with the way that the tools that are available now and what you're capable of doing creatively with them is staggering compared to what it was like with analog, compared to what it was like going direct to discs in the lathe, compared to what it was like poking holes in a piece of paper so a piano can play it. It's going to just continue, and it's completely off our radar where it's going to go. And we get asked we probably get asked, well, where's the technology? I don't know. But I know it's going to be evolving towards convenience and quality.
Well, and I'll tell you, at Berkeley, we're beginning to look into new technologies like mixed reality and artificial intelligence, and people are like, oh, AI, what is it going to do? But AI is going to do what Pro Tools did, or what the synthesizers or what drum machines did. They're just going to, it's going to be a great way to augment the creative expression. So do I think that a bunch of AI robots are going to take the place of Steve or anybody else on this panel? No, not necessarily. But do I think that they're going to liberate the creative
Some people
expression?
think I am a robot.
But I think for me that's what's interesting, that I see these tools largely as doing what the synthesizer did, or again, what Pro Tools have done with respect to the ability for us to augment the possibilities of creative expression more than anything else. Going, back to the way that incomes are derived. Have you guys noticed, being in this genre of music, I'm applying a very broad umbrella, but has live always been the primary driver? And is that remained relatively constant as the primary driver of revenue? Or as we've made this shift, has it become way more dominant, in terms of the way that you guys are making money?
Did you say like live performance?
Live performance, sorry. Yeah.
Live performance.
I mean, has it always been this way, historically? Because, if you're a pop artist, and, you could be Mariah Carey and never have toured live for the first 15 years. 15
I know,
years.
it used to be all about the record revenues, and now it's all about, it's...
Well, it's based on the kind of music you make, the musician you are. For someone like myself, probably endorsements are huge. With the right endorsements, that's been very big for me for the years. After that, I would say it's touring. I do very well when I tour. Doing master classes, it's just free money. Well, I mean, of course I work, but I love it. I just love it, And record sales in the earlier days was was probably at the top, because touring is expensive and risky. But record sales, when people were buying CDs and stuff, there was income. Publishing is the music business best kept secret. Okay. When I was 20 years old, I asked Frank Zappa, I said, give me some advice about being a musician, and I was expecting some elaborate answer, esoteric answer about how you have to be true to your musical integrity and all this stuff. And he just said, keep your publishing. I didn't even know what publishing was, so he gave me a number to an attorney who is still my attorney, 37 years later. And at 20 years old, I went and I started my own publishing company, and I secured international sub-publishers, which is necessary that most musicians don't even know about. And I just made it a point, because Frank said it, to never, ever give up any of my publishing. And I've acquired a vast publishing catalog, and that's just...
In addition to your own music, you mean?
No, my music is
okay.
my publishing, yeah. And just that little piece of advice saved me millions of dollars, because... I also never felt panic You know, I never felt like I had to have something or everything was going to fall apart. I was never desperate. So that created an opportunity, a clarity in decision making. Do you know what I mean? Because if you're desperate, then the decisions you make are going to be based on your desperation, and they're usually not the highest quality decisions. So I would just say also that today there's so many ways to monetize your intellectual property. If you're a musician, how many people here make music, write songs? How many people have publishing companies, their own publishing companies? You have to go out, very simple. I did it when I was 20 years old, and it cost $12.50, and it's cheaper now. Start your publishing company, go online, figure it out, register your songs. You're protected. And YouTube to monetize video clips. You know, that's another. There's many little ways that you can create. So it's not just one way. It's all merchandise. Yeah. You know. But you need to find out for you which is the most appropriate. So for me, it's endorsements and touring. Yeah. But here's the one thing, and I know I'm going on a bit, that I when I look back has always worked for me. I've always lived a little bit below my means. You know, like if I was making $200 a week, I figured out a way to live on $180. Do you know what I mean? And I just put $20 aside or something. And that has served me really well, because if you're making $5 million a year and you're living on $5,100,000 a year, you got a monkey on your back, you know? And with musicians, you eat well for a while, and then it kind of goes like this. But if you always just kind of figure out your lifestyle just a little bit below, if you're not sure, ask Bryan, because he'll figure it out for you. He'll tell you how much you should be living on. So that was very helpful. Yeah. What?
You should see my Quicken.
You do QuickBooks?
Oh my God, every penny.
I bet.
Can I tell you something? When the Aristocrats started in 2011, Steve took me aside, and he goes, because this is a brand new band with no label, no nothing, some buzz, but just starting from scratch. And he looks at me and he goes, you know you're going to have to tour your ass off. You know that. I was like, okay. But we did. And the live performance was everything. I think live performance is really important for a brand new band in this day and age, with some exceptions.
It's funny though, right?
He
Yeah.
was looking at me because
not that we didn't perform live, but I mean, it was just a strange model.
No, it's starting TV first. It's the most unfair advantage you could possibly have. I mean, I cheated in every possible way I could, and it worked. Completely worked. It worked. Yeah, I mean, but that was part of my idea of the show, is that, hey, if this works, if I can get an audience to kind of check this out consistently, I bet I can put out a record, I bet I can tour it, and I bet it can just be this whole thing that's feeding off of itself in a nice way. So that was the idea, and then people were dumb enough to listen to me, so they let me do this crazy thing, and it totally worked the way that I thought. Like every once in a while, you know, you can just plan. A buddy of mine told me a story about trying to get rid of a hornet's nest right outside of his garage. And he said, okay, here's what's going to happen. Me and my buddy are going to go over to this hornet's nest. You're going to get a can of spray paint, and I have a lighter, and you have a lighter in front of the spray paint can, and I'm going to hit a broomstick against the hornet's nest, and all the hornets are going to come out, and you're going to light this thing, and all the wings
What
are
could
going to
go wrong?
And all the wings are going to burn off, and then we can kind of safely get the hornet's nest out of here. And they looked at each other and they go, okay, let's do it. And then they did it, and it totally worked. So I don't know, every once in a while something, as you plan, totally works. So I don't know. I have big,
you can
stupid...
see that mentality in his shows, too. They totally work.
The first show that we ever did as a band.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was the first. So it's like the TV show's a hit. The record's a hit.
Yeah.
Brendon's like, okay, so we got a tour.
So
we rehearsed.
And by the way, I got the idea of using Bryan Beller because I saw that you guys were playing together, and you had Keneally playing with you. So I completely ripped off that idea, and now
We're in a long line.
and now Satriani's using them. Anyway,
we're there. It's in Albuquerque, right?
It's in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
This is what I call the pretend tour.
Yeah. And it's the first show.
Because we did colleges, not metal
Yeah.
venues.
Yeah.
Right.
And we don't know what's going to happen. Who's going to show up? Like, it's a live performance of this band for the very first time.
Yeah, a
ever.
band that doesn't exist, mind you.
Not a
Yeah.
real band. No
Yeah.
one knows who we are.
Yeah.
Literally, Brendon and I could walk up and down right in front of the
Yeah.
venue, in front of all the people waiting outside, and no one
cares.
No one
Yeah.
cared who we were.
No one cared.
Yeah.
No one cared.
And
Yeah.
we got up there, and there's 1,000 people there
Yeah.
at the first show.
Yeah. Well, that's because it's a TV show. I mean, it was a TV show, so that's the unfair advantage. But it doesn't work that way with everything, obviously. But
I saw that show. It was fantastic, and there was a lot more than 1,000 people in the audience.
right, yeah, I remember. Yeah, that was like
Outstanding. And
Oh,
you did
thank
more
you.
than one show.
Yeah,
Did.
yeah,
Oh, that first show was really exciting, if you remember.
yeah. That was exciting. There's a lot of stuff that went wrong. Oh, it was like Spinal Tap. I would drop my guitar every 2 songs. I'd get handed a guitar with I was like, we should get some strap locks.
Rookies.
I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
strap locks.
A couple of more questions, and I want to make sure we open it up for everybody to ask questions from the audience. Overall, do you guys think that streaming has contributed to more discovery of young talent, or is it a heck of a lot more difficult today given all the noise that exists? Like, are these recommendation engines inherently just, biased towards the more popular band and to some degree disadvantaging young or new music?
Is the
coming
long
out?
tail too long?
Does the long tail actually exist, or is it just a myth?
I think it probably depends on the definition of discovery, right? Like, are we saying, has it increased music discovery, meaning people that have reached someone they might not have otherwise reached? I think absolutely. Has it increased the number of megastars in the universe? No. I think it just depends on how you define an audience for you and what you want it to be. So I don't know. I don't know if it's that simple, right? But I think what is undoubtedly true is there are people that are able to put music out now that wouldn't have been able to put out music before, and there are people that find that music that wouldn't have found it, and it means a lot to them. I think ultimately that's really, really fucking great.
Yeah. Right on.
Jackie?
Oh, no, I was gonna say yeah, but I don't want to. You go ahead first. I can wait. I'll just keep this next to my mouth. It smells great. It smells like
We're the first ones to
smells
use
like
them.
bubble gum.
Like broccoli.
It's like,
Why did you guys say broccoli together? Does it smell like?
We'll tell you later.
yeah. You
geez,
missed all
I
the
don't wanna
fun
know.
backstage.
Some smelly broccoli in our green room. I think that I know as myself as a music fan, I've discovered a ton of bands because of just picking up whatever it is, on a Pandora channel or on Spotify radio, Apple Music, whatever it is. I know that I've discovered a lot of bands, and when I go out on the road with my bands, I love just talking to people out in the crowd because it's the only way you're really going to know how people are figuring stuff out. Yes, we all analyze data and our spreadsheets, but unless you're out there really talking to people, how did you hear about the show? How did you hear about this band? It's really interesting to hear that there's definitely people that are discovering bands because of these playlists on all of these streaming platforms, and I think that that's great. So that's like why it's so important to figure out how to get your band playlisted, so that you have the opportunity to get discovered. But I think it's definitely opened up a new world for bands that, just like what you were talking about earlier, like on Amazon when your show was hidden and nobody could find it, right? I mean, like on some of these streaming platforms, people find bands that they never would have heard of otherwise because there's no record stores anymore. And
There's also the word of mouth thing. Like, if you look at a Facebook comment thread of someone, posted a Spotify link or even a YouTube link, you'll see is some people will comment, but then other people will they won't say anything. They'll just tag their friends.
Yeah.
They'll just be like, it's like they didn't say anything. They said everything they needed to say. They tagged. They're like, look at
That's
this.
like the ultimate comment you could possibly get is someone's like, hey, check this out. This guy's doing something. Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
I think it's doing both. I mean, you have to look at even iTunes charts, like in the metal charts, it's reinforcing great acts that have been around, and then it leaves a little gap for the new guy, So if you look this week, I'm sure that Metallica, one of their records is #1 in metal, or in the top 10 at least in metal. It usually is. You'll see the Black Album, Master of Puppets, all that stuff, and you'll go, oh, there's a new Gojira album, or there's a new Amon Amarth album, or there's something else going on. But it's usually that. So you get to see. I think it happens. It's not black or white. I think it's hopefully the people that have something to say will move up the line, but it doesn't always work that way. Some people, a lot of people have access to everything. Look at the movies that are being made. It's the same exact thing. Everyone's got access to cameras that look absolutely fantastic. Does that mean they have something to say all the time? Does that mean that do they have something that moves us? I mean, the best musicians, you take away all their tricks, and they've got really, really strong melody over really strong chord movement. And that's it. It's that simple, I think, for me.
My last question, then I want to open it up. What new technologies excite you, guys, in terms of what's coming down the line? Steve, I told you I was reading one of your interviews right before we came on stage, and I read about this hologram tour, which kind of blew me away. So I've heard about it. I know that Elvis did something and Tupac did something, but are you actually going to go on the road with a Zappa hologram? I want to hear more about this.
Well, when Amit called me and told me about it, of course I love supporting Frank, Frank's music in any way. I toured with Dweezil doing ZPZ, and of course the hologram technology is very exciting for me. And I've been working on some concepts for hologram tours, but not in the way that you would conventionally think about using it. So when the offer came, I thought, well, it could be very cool. And in discussing it with Amit, he's got some ideas that they're off the radar of what people, I believe, are conventionally thinking what it's going to be. And yeah, I thought I'd love to do it if you get it together, and if it happens, I'd be happy. I couldn't do a whole tour, so I would be happy to, I mean, that was the idea. Various alumni would come in and contribute for some shows here and there. And it would be a hoot to be standing up there with Frank again, in a sense. Like I say, that technology is transforming exponentially. I had a meeting the other day with a company that does holograms, and there's 3 different projects they want to do with me. And there's one I'm probably going to jump on, or 2 maybe. But they're incredibly time-consuming and expensive right now. The technology is very expensive. And it's what I've seen last Tuesday from the #1 holographic company is pretty extraordinary stuff. It really is. So this is what I'm talking, what I was mentioning before, is there's technology that's evolving that is completely off our radar. I mean, we didn't even know digital was off our radar until it came. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw electricity coming, So this is so exciting. This is what excites me. The things that I can't even imagine that I can't even imagine. Because then I start trying to imagine them. and that's cool. And the thing to realize is your ability to create any new technology that you can even conceive of that seems completely extraordinary is directly related. Your ability to create it is directly joined at the hip with your belief that you can do it. Now, I know that sounds a little esoteric, but that's the way it's always been. Somebody's going to come along and they're going to say, I don't even want to have to go out to see a hologram. I want to sit in my living room and have a complete experience right here and be in the jungles of whatever and be sitting with and be a part of an entertainment event that's completely realistic, whatever it is. And it'll probably start with porn.
I was going to say that 20 minutes
I knew
ago.
you were going to say it.
It's true. The pornography business was the first business to figure out how to get money from people online.
Well, for most people, that's one of the most important.
What?
That's anyway.
It's true though. They were consultants to big business under the radar.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. So it's going to be very exciting to see where the technology goes, and some of you here might be at the forefront of it or up here. So, yeah.
Well,
to answer your question, though, I'd be very happy to contribute to a tour like that with the extraordinary ideas that they have and also the fact that it's frank. If that happens, I would love to be a part of it.
Yeah, and we often think of technologies as just media that carries art, but we're not always conscious of the way that technologies actually change the very way that we make art, right? So take immersive technologies or VR and AR. What's blowing me away is the concept that you can develop now non-linear narratives, right? So that, today we experience music in the exact same way that somebody intended it to be experienced, right? From start to finish, and that's it. But the prospect that you can be in the music and basically a creator can create an environment where people are experiencing that music in a non-linear way, where depending on the way that they interact, it can go all kinds of different dimensions. I think it will totally change the way that we're expressing ourselves musically. But I'm
Well,
curious.
you see, now there's an idea, there's a concept that you're starting to, you don't quite know what it is, but you're reaching. And that's how it's done.
Well, look at, there's an amazing documentary about the invention of recorded sound called Sound Breaking. I don't know if anybody have you guys seen it? It's a series on PBS, but it talks about actually Rubber Soul by the Beatles and the song Tomorrow Never Knows, and how it was the first time that people said, you don't have to express music in a recorded format the exact same way that you would express it live, right? So you can use loops and reverse stuff. And,
Such a great track.
right? And actually for me that's almost like the big bang of the way that we make music today, because all of a sudden you're like, I can do overdubs, and I can do all kinds of stuff that I could never be able to do live. And that's what's cool about these new technologies, that we can't even imagine artistically where they're gonna take us.
So are you saying that everyone needs to do acid? And then the technology
acid
will
and
arrive?
That's what he's saying.
That's what he said.
What he
That's what I
said.
heard it. I heard
That's
that's
what
what he said, yeah.
We did.
Microdosing.
So Google came to us when I was putting Galacticon together and getting ready for its launch and everything, and they came to Titmouse, which is the animation company where we did Metalocalypse, and they said we want to do a music video using VR, and they have this thing called the tilt brush, which is if you put on the goggles. How many people here have done VR stuff? Okay, so less than half of you, like maybe even less than a quarter of you. I hadn't done it either, and I finally went and checked it out because I knew we were going to partner on this project. So I checked it out, and I finally got it. I understood it. I put it on. I heard that it's stereo too. You can move around the room, and things can move. And I thought, for music, for even mixing music, this would be an amazing thing. It'd be like Minority Report. You could really go in and probably just go in and tweak things and fix things and change things and apply reverbs and do all kinds of crazy stuff, walking in an environment. And here's the greatest part. You can rob those people, because they can't see you. You can just pick their pockets. Anyway, so so we started. So the tilt brush is you can draw like a corkscrew in a 3D environment, and it stays there. And so what they gave us our own kind of Dogma 95 make art with restrictions kind of a thing, and under a certain budget. And so they gave us like a minute and 20 seconds of one of my songs, and I had this idea for a song. And I thought, this song was kind of written to be like. I don't know. Every time I go to Disneyland, I go to Space Mountain, and they pump in a stereo score behind your headset or your headrest. And I thought I would like to write my own version of this song, like a heavy metal version of Space Mountain. And I'd like to be able to experience that, and I'd like to be able to take all these really cool techniques from like 2001 and all these cool sci-fi movies, all these analog things, and try to engineer them into digital. And so we sat there and we did that. And there's a video. I don't even know if it's available just yet, but it's for the song Icarus 666, and it's my outer space, Space Mountain kind of ride, heavy metal. So you're going off through these wormholes, and you're going through these different parts of outer space, and you're flying in a spaceship, and you're in a cockpit, and it's interactive, and it's actually vibrating to the tempo map of the song. So I gave him click tracks, and I gave him all this stuff and showed him where to cut and all that stuff. And there was one director, this guy Dylan Carter, and we were looking at the 2001 sequence. And this is a fun part of digital technology, where it mimics analog. So like even all of like our like the Axe effects and all the guitar cabinet simulators and all that stuff, they are somewhat mimicking the trajectory of the innards of your amps in some way. So it does have capacitors represented, and it has like things like that. But we went into the Dylan was like, you've got to see how they made that Stargate sequence in 2001, which is the totally crazy, trippy part about like the 3/4 part of the movie. If you haven't seen it, get really high and put it on, and you can thank me later. But it's really a cool sequence. Anyway, so there were certain things inside of that, and we found out how they used paint, like actual paint and cool things like that to make these crazy images happen, and we recreated them in our video. So just to basically, almost like in Fantasia, try to find a visual representation of the music that we're listening to. And it was a really cool experience to see it, just to get my first toe wet in VR that way. As you know, as someone who wants to see has like a specific idea of what I want to see and how I want the sound represented visually. So it was just a fun, different way to experience it. And I was talking to Google and I said, you know, if I'm going to take this thing on the road, I would love to have these stations out in front, because it's going to change how everyone feels about VR, or it's going to just open their eyes to like what is possible with VR, because a lot of people haven't even tried it yet.
Yeah, I mean, for the first time, you can actually walk into the music.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen actually a prototype. Viacom has a division called Viacom Next, and I saw this. They have a cool game where I've never experienced music this way. You know, like you're walking in the song and you're interacting with stems and parts of the song and making your own mix in a way that you've never experienced music in your entire life that way. And it's cool to see, like, okay, now as an artist, you're like, well, how would my music feel if somebody touched it? You know, which we're not conditioned to think that way. We think of music mostly in an oral sensory mode, but not in a feel, from a tactile,
right,
mode. Any other thoughts that anybody has?
I mean, I think, to build on that a little bit, what's interesting that you talked about there is you talked about multiple different types of collaborators that you work with to build something.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's one of the craziest trends right now, regardless of the technology that's ultimately created by it, is, I think the music industry used to sit here and occasionally it interacted with art and photographers and these things, and now I think that's getting closer and closer every day. And it's getting to a point where most of these projects are sort of multimedia things that include people collaborating with Viacom, which is not how it used to work. It used to be that you gave your thing to them and then they put it up on the screen. And now it's creatives at all of these organizations that are visual, photography, fashion, music.
Right.
I think if you think about this city and what's happening here right now, where I think there's elements of like a creative renaissance that feels like it's happening in LA, and that's the result of billions and billions of dollars in film production,
right,
that's combining with the music industry, combining with the fashion industry that's moving here from places like Paris, and an art industry that's starting to thrive here as well in new ways. And I think that's mostly created by technology and people from these places that are starting to work together more to make shit.
Well, can I tell you, even just in connection, I really do like to think visually with music, because I feel like even whatever album cover it is, that influences how I hear music. The colors. Let's say Passion and Warfare. That's what just leapt to my mind because you're right here. And but it's also a gorgeous album cover with all these evocative colors that really, I think, tie into the feel of all the music. I think it's such a deliberate kind of...
Yeah, and you know what it's like when we were kids and we had LPs, vinyl. The music takes on the personality of the cover art. It's like Led Zeppelin 3 or something, or any record, and that's I like what you said about being able to find a way of experience music on a tactile level. And I guess an album cover would probably, it's a psychological thing. But
it really does. It gets inside of your mind. I keep thinking about the subconscious stuff and like how something can enter your dream state in some way. And sometimes those kinds of evocative colors and things like that really do it. So with that in mind, I've been trying to build out art, just as much art as I can with Galacticon, just trying to let go. I love sci-fi fantasy art. So even on Instagram, I found people, and I've been following all these sci-fi artists, all these modern guys. Like I found a guy in Arkansas who does gorgeous 3D art, and I tracked him down and I said, I want you to, I want to hire you to just build out this world with me. And he built me a couple of just amazing posters, and he has just a fantastic sense of scale and depth of field and diffused light and all this gorgeous stuff. And it's really fun collaborating with those people and just building out a whole world. Because I don't think you can just put out a record anymore. That's what I'm learning. I think you really have to put out an entire universe. You can't just put out like a slide a cassette over across the table. For me, I think I want to experience music in the way that I did when I was a kid.
I think the brand and the art and the music all ends up, if it's all conceived properly, it all ends up being one experience.
Yeah, and
regardless of medium, regardless of streaming or downloading or listening,
Right.
or whatever, somehow you can see it, you can feel it, and it becomes this thing where you just know what it is.
One of the great things that Brendon pointed out is that now he has the ability to go online and find these people all around any place in the world that have some kind of unique or special gift that then he could collaborate with. This was never possible before, not on the scale that it is now. So imagine the advantage that you have now, not just to take what is uniquely creative to you and put it out there to be a collaborator with anyone around the world that might find it, but the quality of the final product. This could never be done before, to have access to so many creative people and create a collective that just this is why the growth of technology and art right now is we're in a paradigm shift, and it's because of our ability to communicate with each other seamlessly on powerfully creative levels. So anything you do that is exciting to you on a creative level, represent it somehow online and reach out to others to fill in the blanks the way you'll fill in their blanks. This is extraordinarily powerful.
And it's really fun and satisfying. Yeah. That's the other part, is all the stuff that I'm talking about may seem like a huge amount of work, but it's really, that's how I have fun. That's how I pass the day. At the absolute, I love just thinking about just huge things, So it's fun. So working with Google and the tilt brush and all that stuff.
To some degree, for me, this is when, at Berkeley I have this fancy title of VP of Innovation and Strategy, but I'm like, okay, you can't mandate innovation, right? You're a gardener more than you're an architect. You just create the conditions for it. So one of the things that we're doing now for the last couple of years, we have a joint class with MIT. And you're like, okay, what happens if I take a bunch of technologists and a bunch of artists and throw them in together for a semester? What are new creative expressions that come about? Because it's a dialogue. Like, I never think that, well, it's a bunch of technologies doing things and then the artists are following or they're victims to it. I think it's more of a collaboration, if you will, that creates interesting new forms of creative expression, which is what, we're all talking about here.
Yeah, and I think that can be constant now. I mean, I think that's the big advantage of technology, is that you can have that collaboration in real time, always, with anyone, anywhere. So, I mean, we transfer our site, we have 1 billion files that transfer every month.
Every month?
Every month. And to put that in perspective...
300 million, Ryan.
But, to put that in perspective, every one of those represents an idea, right? It's something that someone is getting to someone else to build on it, to make something. It's 40 million people a month to do it, And I think that speaks to a total shift in the way that culture is making things right now. That used to be people in rooms that were collaborating together, and now it's happening totally different, more diversely across different genres, across different mediums,
and you never have to meet them. You don't. I mean, it'd be nice to, but you don't ever meet them. Like the guy I found on Instagram. I haven't met him. I know he's got a family in Arkansas. He doesn't even do this for a living. He's just really good at it. It's strange, yeah. So I would love to meet him, but he's talented.
When you get your VR thing together, you could work directly
Yeah,
with him
we'll
while he's in Arkansas.
Beam yourself to Arkansas.
We'll make each other feel like weird with just staring at each other. I have a friend who tried VR porn one time. This won't get disgusting, don't worry. But
That's the next panel topic.
Yeah, I know, that's different. But anyway, he tried it one time.
They all hold their
He's a
mics.
married man. He's very happily married. But he tried VR porn, and he put on the goggles, and I guess there was a someone was walking around in front of him, like kind of like doing a sexy kind of walk around, and then eventually she made eye contact with my friend, and that's when he had to take the helmet off. He got too nervous; he couldn't handle the intimacy of it. Anyway, it works, is what I'm saying.
What was the name of that technology?
I'll get you a copy of it.
On that note, we have time for a couple of questions, and then I know we have to finish. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because no one really talked about how much YouTube is, the percentage of how you're reaching people and then income, which I know would probably be small enough.
It's an extraordinary tool for an independent artist because if you have the goods, now you can be as brutally creative, wildly creative as you want. You got to walk the walk and put it up, and you immediately have access to the world. It's an amazing tool, and for me, it's served an incredible purpose. Very early on, when they were offering monetization, I monitored all my videos and everything, anything. There's companies that will go out and capture. They have this software that you can they'll recognize a song that anybody uploads in a second, and automatically it goes to your monetization page. So I've been kind of forensic with this because it's another form of promotion and income. So I think my media guy tells me I get about 1 million hits a month on various things, and we monetize a lot of them, and then the ones that we don't, there's a company that I use, Audium, incredible company. They'll just go out and find everything, and it's a battle because whenever you marry a video to music, there's a particular kind of a license that you need that's called a sync license, and the person that wrote the music has to approve the sync license. And the way that you monetize is you go in the back end of YouTube, and it's not very difficult. I don't do it. I don't do any of this. I just tell them to do it. And there's various ways that you can collect on what you upload. One is based on if you're the owner of the video, there's a percentage. And you should check into all this because things are constantly changing. If you are the publisher, if you own the publishing, then there is a percentage of the ad revenue that comes in for the amount of hits that you get, that you get as a publisher, and then there's the copyright, whoever owns the master. So and this is all in the back end when you monetize a video on YouTube. So you would be surprised how many people go around to your videos and monetize them for themselves.
I have one.
Yeah.
A Black Sabbath video, they monetized it.
Well, you can issue a takedown order. It's very easy because all you got to do is
No,
prove
they
that
didn't take it down, they monetized it.
it's your video.
No, I shot them, but it's their performance. So when they watch it, they get it.
Oh, but it's their
Okay, yeah,
music.
but technically, you
Yeah,
can
their music.
you can request the portion of the ownership of the video itself. You know, it's not very much. I mean, we're talking like pennies.
Steve will represent
And-
you for free.
No. There's a consultant portion.
How do you make money doing your promotions? How do you get paid?
Promotion?
I mean, don't you rep people and give them airplay? Or can I
Right.
pay for airplay?
Oh, so there are actually independent promotions people who are like, unsigned hire to work their artists, and they get paid by those artists or managers or directly. I work for a label, they pay me, and the artists that are on that label are the artists that I represent and I, promote to radio.
Okay, unfortunately, I have to. Can I take one more, or am I done? Okay. Well, sorry, we have to go, but I want to thank everybody on the panel for being awesome. And thanks for you guys for coming so early. Appreciate it. Thanks.